All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm glad you're sticking with us because this conversation with Kate is just getting started. You can see just in that the brief glimpse into those different situations that a person just feels completely stuck at times. And that's where coaching really breaks things open because the answer is almost always right in front of our faces, but what a coach does is help us pull it out in front, go, "Oh, I already know how to do this, don't I?" And the coach just nods and say, "Okay, now specifically, what do you want to do first? What do you want to do second? What do you want to do third?" And so let's bring Kate back on. Crate. That's not your name, Kate. So don't make me try to say crate again. Um, Kate, so let's talk to me a little bit about your process of coaching. So let's go back to that place a person feels stuck. Where do you start with breaking this thing open? What's your first step?
So I take a strengths-based approach in my coaching. So I like to start by getting to understand people. So what is it that you do really well? What is it that you really love doing? So we can pull from that. I mean, in my prior example of my client saying, I don't know how to do this, and then he did know how to do it. I could pull that out because I already knew that was a strength. So I like to start by understanding people's strengths. But then we look at, okay, what's the challenge in front of us? Or what's the feedback that you've been given? And really start to understand it. I think a lot of times, especially with communication, people are just told something like, you need to work on your communication. It's like, sure, I guess I understand that, but communication is so broad. What does that mean? You couldn't possibly know what to act on based on work on your communication skills. So
Yeah.
that's usually the first. We do some discovery, we do some exploration, some gathering of feedback to understand what are the actual behaviors, what are we talking about when we say communication.
So talk to me about that. How do you get them from that broad? How do you get them to be more specific? Because the clearer, like you're right, the clearer you are on what you're actually dealing with, the easier it is to prescribe, find a path. How do you get them to become more clear? What's your secret trick?
So one of my favorite things to do is to do a 360 or to do some stakeholder interviews. So
Okay.
I will actually go talk to the people who work most closely with my client. It could be, and I usually try to get, I say
You'll
360 because,
actually go and actually so the
oh yeah,
encouragement is make sure you talk to as many people on a 360 around that person.
that's right. I was like, I want to talk to a couple of people above you, a couple of your peers, your juniors, if you're working externally or cross-functionally, some of those people get a real view from people who see my client in different situations and in different ways. And then I don't give any specific feedback. So I don't say, oh, Todd said you do this. Say, listen, I talked to 8 people and they all talked about this one thing you do. So that's clearly
Mhm.
something that we should, that's something that's really driving the way that people are seeing you. And we should work on that thing.
Okay, I like that. And so, and if someone doesn't have someone like you, that's the value of working with Coach Select is you're actually going to go and do a little bit of that research. Uh, but otherwise, a person's got to do some of the hard work because to ask those questions, that's difficult. So,
Mhm.
how do you get person past the emotional barrier of getting that solid feedback like that?
So I think my clients love to hate me because I always told them they're going to start off an engagement loving me, and then they're going to get to this trough in the middle where they hate me because I'm making them do the difficult things they don't want to do, and then they're going to come out the other end going, "Oh, I'm so glad you made me do that. That was worth it." But one of the things that if the client is not doing at 360, I'll have them go have the follow up conversation. So let's say it's I've gotten the you don't communicate well, and my client's sitting there like, I have no idea what that means, or yeah, I could tell it's not working, but I don't know why it's not working, and that's a really bad place to be. So I'll have them go follow up and have the conversation themselves. Like, give me some examples. What specifically could I do differently? What specifically am I doing wrong? Because I think people give feedback in order to be helpful, in theory, but the way that most people give feedback is not specific enough to be helpful. So sometimes you have to do that legwork yourself.
So, do you feel like the real power is putting person on a journey of discovery of some sort? I mean, there are some people that are uncoachable that aren't going to make change. Would you think that's the critical factor? Is when they don't get in that into discovery mode?
Yes, and the thing I said yes, absolutely, right. If you go in with the attitude of, "This is how I am," and so people can either like it or not like it, then you won't want to. Or I've also had people say to me, "I'm X years old, like, I'm not going to change." I mean, if that's your approach, then that works for you, but I would say coaching is not worthwhile. But for people who are I know there's something happening that I'm not quite getting or I'm not quite taking the right action on, and I want to figure out what that action is, then coaching is so powerful. But the thing I also say to clients, listen, this thing is true about you, whether you want to work on it or not. Like there is something happening. You can either go have the difficult conversation and hear the feedback that maybe will hurt your feelings, or you can ignore it, but it's going to still be true whether or not you investigate it.
So how do you get the person, I mean, because that's a reality check. You're wanting this person to get as honest of a reality check as possible. And so many people struggle with that over and over and over again. Feedback is difficult. Getting into that, I'm from Texas, so that getting out of the Alamo where they're in this defensive posture, how do you encourage them to get out of that defensive posture so they can get into that place of discovery?
I think the first is just that reality check where I'll say, listen, there's something going on. Right. And I think a lot of times people get distracted by something. So, oh, the way they delivered the feedback wasn't good. Or, this person isn't even credible at the thing they gave me feedback on. Fine. So I'll often start with clients who listen. We don't know what it is. We don't know whether this person's feedback was 100% right. It probably wasn't because they're a person. So therefore they're not perfect. But let's just assume there's something useful for you in that feedback. And let's go explore it. We don't have to take it at face value. It's not a yes, no, but there might be some nugget of wisdom or some perspective you haven't seen before. So let's explore with curiosity to see what is in there. And then we can decide how much of it you want to act on, what you really want to do about it.
You said with curiosity.
Hmm.
I mean, just that one little descriptor, is that something that you feel like is important? I've really got to make sure they're going into curiosity mode because you said they start out in finger pointing mode. This person is how they ask the question, or it's the question and it's like, do you see them get through? Is that the first barrier that you see often? And then how do you get them into that curiosity mode?
Well, I think the first is to acknowledge, right? So someone's saying like, "Oh, I got feedback and I don't agree with it." And let me tell you why. It's because this person yelled at me or they were a jerk about it or they're not even good at it. So I acknowledge that. That's usually true. The feedback was usually given in an imperfect way. Yeah, it's mostly
True.
bull.
Yeah. So you acknowledge that. So you're able to move that over to the side.
And then I also acknowledge it might not be totally right. Like they don't understand. There was this again, that's probably true too.
Okay.
Acknowledge
So it
it's
doesn't
not
have to go
100%.
internal. You can hold it kind of loosely.
Yeah. Sometimes I use the analogy of a gift, right? The feedback is a gift. And
Okay.
sometimes you get a gift and you're like, "Oh my God, how did you know? This is so me, right? This is perfect. Like, I feel so seen and understood." And then sometimes you get a gift and you're like, "Oh, I see where you're going with that, right? It wasn't perfect, but yeah, I see I did mention something along those lines, right?" And then sometimes you get a gift and you're just like, "Absolutely not. I hate this. This is so not me. I'm kind of offended that you even thought I would like this." And
Yeah.
probably 95% of feedback falls into that middle category where it's like,
Mm.
"Okay, yeah, you know, there's something there, and but maybe I need to exchange it for something slightly different, different color, different size," right? And that's the exploration process with the feedback. Like someone took the time to tell you something. There is something there you need to dig into, even if it wasn't exactly perfect in the way that it was crafted or delivered.
Yeah. So it sounds like a person starts in that first category, but the real power position is when you can get them to see things, see it as that gift that, okay, okay. And a little head nod or a head turn.
Yeah.
Okay. And just like I heard you, is like take a pause, hold it loosely, and view it differently. That's a very intentional approach to that feedback. Well, because on one hand you see it as an attack. Okay, I've got to fight back at an attack. But you
Yeah.
said, but there's that little hybrid approach right in the middle where you go, okay, I don't accept this. I don't necessarily deny it either. But okay, what does this really mean?
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay,
What does this mean to me is a very key question. Like it doesn't have to, it's not a yes, no, right? It doesn't have to be 100% agree, 100% disagree.
that is good.
What does this mean? What could I learn from this?
Yeah, getting out of that either or mentality and getting
Yeah.
to a place where this could have multiple definitions. I think that is a vital, vital place to be because you're not discovering otherwise. You've already determined. Yeah, so I think it is asking that question. When you're hearing whatever this is, have you already determined the answer or are you looking for the answer?
Mhm.
That's a whole different response and a whole different position, whole different perspective to this problem and discovering this discovering a clarity. What's one more thing you help them do to get clear on that problem?
I think it comes down to looking those little behaviors, right? So
Mhm.
it and we often get stuck on, "Oh, that's not how I meant it," or "That's not what I was trying to do." And so sometimes it's just focusing on you've got to separate what your intent was from how it was actually perceived and how it landed. And sometimes the smallest little behavior changes can really change how people perceive you. So one of my clients, as an example, super analytical guy. He's a private equity investor. And the way he was presenting to his bosses was so analytical and numbers based that they thought he didn't care or that he wasn't excited about any possible deals. And that's he just needed to take his energy level up one notch, right? To smile a little more, to be a little more animated in how he was presenting the idea. And it was a very subtle shift, but it completely changed the way that people perceived him. So sometimes we just need to narrow in on like, what are these little behavior shifts that are really impactful? And how can I just nudge myself a little bit more in one direction?
Is that really the power shift? Is when you help them recognize it's just little things? Does that take
Yeah,
some of the weight off their shoulders even?
it totally does, right? Because it's like if I take this client as an example, he's really introverted, he's really analytical, he's quiet, and the partner that he was managing up to is the exact opposite. Like classic sales guy, really, really tall, really big booming voice, very charismatic. And he's just like, I'm never gonna be that. So I don't know if I can be successful.
Yeah, they
Right. So
lose
for him,
hope.
it was right. It looks like he's like, that's impossible, right? I'm never going to be that. And that's why I start with the strengths of, okay, but what are your strengths? And then where are you having the most conflict with this person who's such a different communication style? And then how could you make really small behavior tweaks that you still feel like you when you're not trying to be him, but you are moving one step in his direction, or you're showing him something he wants to see at a really critical moment that will make him view you differently.
Oh, that is absolute magic. Kate, I want you to stick with us. And so, everybody, this is so intriguing as we get to challenging the thought process, shifting from a defined mentality of what this is, but viewing it in a way where you're holding it loosely. You go into discovery and curiosity mode. And she said she's able to see shifts, not doing big things, but doing little things. Stick with us after the break. I'm going to ask Kate what her secret weapon is. Everybody's got a mythical secret sword. I'm going to ask her what her secret mythical sword is. Stick with us.